Join us to get exclusive and rare access to some of the industry's best leaders. Leaders who will share all their secrets to success with you. Leaders who have closed thousands of successful deals between them, generating hundreds of billions of dollars. Leaders giving you the roadmap to fast track your career and reach the highest echelons of the business. So welcome to Series 2 of the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast, and best of luck on your growth journey. Hi, I'm Pete Nieberg, the host of the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast and the global head at Outram. And before this episode starts, I have a small favour to ask of you. We had just over 20% of listeners subscribe. And our goal in Series 2 is to increase that to 40. So if you've ever liked any of our episodes or our content, please hit subscribe. It helps the channel more than you can ever know. And the bigger this channel gets, the higher profile leaders that we can collaborate with to help you on your journey. So thanks for your support in this area. We also appreciate how busy you are. And we've added timestamps to all of our video content in Series 2, making it really easy for you to access the topics of most interest. So I hope that helps and enjoy the episode. We have a great guest for you all today. I'm super excited to be joined by Maria Watts, Managing Director and Co-Head of Global Consumer Investment Banking at Baird in Chicago. Maria is an exceptional investment banking leader with 20 years of experience in the space, closing many successful transactions with a value in total excess of about 30 billion, right, Maria? So she started her career as an analyst at Stephens, built her career at Baird for the last 15 years, is an expert in M&A, public offerings, and fairness of opinions across the consumer space, but as well as other sectors too. Maria currently sits on Baird's Investment Banking Management Committee, having previously served as a member of the M&A Fairness Opinion Committee at Baird. Throughout her career, she has been involved in recruiting, coaching, training, and developing talent. And it's an area that Maria is interested and passionate about. So extremely lucky to have her today sharing her insights on how to succeed in the industry, as well as helping you all grow and develop. And if that wasn't enough, Maria's leadership's been noticed and recognized with awards, including last year when she was named to Crain's Chicago Business List of notable leaders in finance. And in 2020, Maria was named one of Merger and Acquisition's most influential women in mid-market M&A. So given Maria's expertise, range of skills, knowledge, and passion for development, I'm really psyched for this conversation and her many insights. So Maria, welcome to the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast, and thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to do it. I'm glad we can put it together, and I appreciate the intro. That was very kind.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. So why don't you just start introducing Baird to our listeners and what you do for your clients?
Sure. So Baird is a leading global middle market investment bank. We are advisory focused. So we don't lend off our balance sheet. Everything we do is to provide the best advice, and we're agnostic to what that is. So that could be a sell side process, that could be an IPO, that could be a continuation vehicle, that could be a minority capital raise, that could be a recap. And our goal is to just deliver it wholeheartedly without bias and be experts in delivering that advice.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction. I'm sure many of our listeners will be aware of Baird, but thanks for filling us in.
I hope so.
That's it. Exactly. And why don't you start telling us, how did you end up in investment banking?
Oh, I tell recruits today that I could never get a job in investment banking because you have to know about it when you're 5 years old, evidently, in order to make the right steps in order to get through the gauntlet of the interview process as a junior banker. I actually admittedly didn't know much about investment banking. I had a friend from college who was a first year analyst, and honestly, he was kind of complaining about the intensity of it and the hours and the high profile, high stakes nature. I think looking for some credit or
sympathy
to bend my ear on that. And I was like, that sounds amazing. Like, where do I sign up? And he was like, well, you're a little bit late to the game here, but let me see if I can pass my resume along. And unlike it is today, which is, again, really a lot to overcome to get a job as a junior banker, my questions were really about the intangibles. Like, were you into team sports? What did that teach you about teamwork in a job? And what classes did you like in school? And what are your strengths and weaknesses? And how do you organize yourself in your day? And it was very different than it is today, where it's calculate this DCF for me. But I think the part of it was, do you have the passion and the skill set and the understanding of the intensity to be successful? And again, there was a little bit of naivete that I didn't fully know what I was getting into. And so I wholeheartedly was passionate in that interview. And here we are.
Nice. Well, nice journey. And again, thanks for sharing it. I think it helps us understand a little bit about what got you in there. And just tell the listeners something they don't know about you, they can't find about you, something interesting or unexpected.
So I have two children. And before I got pregnant with my 10-year-old, I decided I wanted to check something off my list that I wouldn't feel comfortable doing once I had children. And so for my husband and my, I think it was probably fifth anniversary, I arranged through a Groupon to go skydiving. And I did not tell him that we were going skydiving until we arrived at the cornfield. And, Groupon, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but back
Yeah,
then it
yeah.
was all the rage. But it's not necessarily the people that are known for the highest quality, it's the people who are trying to drive their business. So, in hindsight, from a risk standpoint, that probably was not a good idea, but we survived and we're still married. And
Mhm.
so it was a thrill, but probably would do it differently today with a little more years on me.
That's it. He forgave you. I did one in New Zealand, amazing experience. So I can definitely relate to that.
It was an amazing experience to do once, and I don't want to do it again.
Done and dusted for sure, for sure. Okay, well, let's get into the meat of today's discussion. In
Sure.
terms of our listeners, many different roles listening today in investment banking, but building a successful investment banking career is tough, and many do drop out before reaching those higher echelons. So, what strategies did you implement to stay the course?
A lot of different strategies. I think one thing is that I've always been really passionate about it, and you have to love this business and take a step back and remove yourself from the minutia of the deliverable of the day and say, how does this fit into the bigger picture? Why does this matter? And then reflect, at least for a moment, as deals cross the finish line, on what you accomplish and how exciting it was, how transformational it was, and impactful. Because otherwise, it's too much of a sacrifice and too much of a commitment to just grind without patting yourself on the back occasionally and being proud of your impact on a deal and on an outcome.
Excellent. So, really understanding the why behind what you're doing and taking the time to reflect on how you've grown and, more importantly, celebrate the win. That's what I
The
took
much
from that.
more eloquent and concise way to say it. Yes, exactly.
No
Exactly.
worries. And when we're thinking about it, I'm going to jump straight into a bit about recognition then on that
Sure.
front. So, investment banking doesn't always have the best reputation for recognition. You've already talked about the importance of that from a self reflection point of view and celebrating the wins. So, what do you see, first of all, from your perspective, as good recognition for team members within the business?
So it's a problem, and it's not something that I see changing quickly because people are expecting high performance. It is
Hmm.
high stakes. Everyone is accountable for their work. And so oftentimes the expectation negates then the senior banker's need or feeling of a need to say thank you. But what I found is it's really the immediacy of the feedback and thank you and appreciation. It doesn't need to be huge. It can literally just be stopping by someone's desk after they do good work or after a client mentions something. And it's interesting as I reflect, usually the client is calling me with the good or bad feedback, right?
Hmm.
And the good feedback keeps me going, and I have to remember to then pass that on, share that with others, because in the same way they're looking for recognition and appreciation, I am too, and it usually comes from the client, right? So just being aware of it, that everyone's doing their best and everyone knows what the stakes are, but it's nice if something is differentiated to call it out.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And In the moment, I agree with you. I think you've got to really catch it there, and if it's meaningful, then it tends to be in the moment. So yeah, and I'm sure remembering all those conversations in the busy day is not easy that you have with the client. So it's great to try and put that on the board and let it filter down. I know as well that when we spoke, you're a big advocate of owning your own career. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how did you go about this and what advice could you give to our listeners today in that area?
Sure. So the example that I often share and reflect on is when I joined Baird as an experienced associate and was looking at my path to VP, a big hole in my resume was that I had not done any public equity work. And our consumer and at the time consumer and industrial were combined, but that was a third of our business, and an important marker of success at Baird is to be well rounded in the advice we give. And within 30 days of being on the platform, I was in the staffer's office on a regular basis saying, "Can you just please put me on every IPO pitch that comes in? I don't care. Just fill me up. I understand we're not going to win every one of them. I understand we're not going to be a lead left book runner on every one of them. But it's really important for me to get comfortable being able to understand this product so that I can lead a team on equity deals." And I actually had two equity pitches in New York on the same day within 6 months of getting spared. And we ended up getting a prominent role on one of those. And all of a sudden, I went from having zero experience to being someone in the bullpen that people would come to and ask questions. And so it's just an example of the staffers are doing their best. They have more than just you to pay attention to, and you need to make sure you're staying top of mind and being explicit in where you see gaps in your skill set and help them help you.
Excellent. Love that. That's great feedback again. Great advice for the listeners. So looking for those gaps, reflecting on where they are and being top of mind for the staffer and actively looking for exposure in those areas. And is that something you should be doing on a yearly basis or as you're coming up to a new role, just so they get a bit more sense about the structure there or strategy?
So we actually, within our global consumer team, introduced a new aspect of the year-end review this year. So are in the midst of hearing back from the junior team what they think, but we took what our professional development committee created almost 10 years ago in terms of an analyst and associate progression roadmap. We also have one for VPs that really lists like by year what skills and competencies you should be developing across all different deals. But we made it where it could be filled in. And we asked all of our analysts and associates to come to their review with it filled in with the pitches and deals that they've done at each aspect. So how many times have you done a data room? List the projects that you've done a data room for, or list the projects that you've calculated in the net working capital peg. And our plan is to start using it on a monthly basis between our development managers and our junior bankers to track it more proactively. Because if you wait until your mid-year or until your year end, a lot of opportunity for growth has lapsed. And we are hopeful, maybe it's wishful thinking, but we're hopeful that people keep it on their desk and use it as a tool to say, hey, where can I be bettering myself on the margin? And also as a reflection of it's not just about tenure, it's about hard skills that you've developed. And so keeping that in perspective as we move through different cycles that have been challenging for different reasons here, and not kind of trying to race through your career, but make sure you check off every part so that you can be successful at the next level.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. It definitely helps us connect a bit more. And a great initiative. I'm sure that's going to be quite powerful to encourage the
Totally.
reflection and work on the skills. So for those that don't have leadership that's really putting these sorts of initiatives in place, maybe make the time to reflect and write your plans. I know
Mm-hmm.
we've heard that in past episodes as well. So thanks for sharing. Let's talk a little bit about that evaluation then, I guess, because you told me as part of the evaluation, feedback is obviously
Mm-hmm.
key and taking on board feedback is key. And that's not always easy for different bankers within the totem pole. So,
Sure.
from your experience, can you share any advice for being better at taking on feedback?
Know that it's not personal, and generally speaking, it's trying to make you better and really listening, because for the most part, people are not good at giving feedback. And so they try to sandwich it in with a lot of positives, and you may miss the extent or magnitude of the feedback if you're not paying attention. So it's on the giver and receiver, right? We work a lot at Baird about, just like you would tell someone coming out of the bathroom with their shirt tucked into their underwear that their shirt's tucked into the underwear. You should also say, after a client call where someone showed up disheveled on a Zoom, like, hey, you may not know this, but even if you're working from home on Monday, you still need to be dressed in a way with clients that projects the importance of the conversation and the relationship. It's not mean, it's just candid.
I think that's key. I think like you get an example in terms of like stuff gets sandwiched and the real message or the important one doesn't get heard. So I think there's some good advice for the leaders listening today, as well as those looking to act on feedback better.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk a bit about peer-to-peer relationships with you, because again, I know you're really passionate about this area and you've been involved heavily in teams and development of teams. So investment banking is not a solitary career. How you grow together and how you learn together as a group is really important. And that's been challenged recently coming out of COVID and the situations we've had. So can you talk a bit about the importance, first of all, of peer-to-peer relationships and why it matters?
Sure. I think it matters because, as we've talked about, this is a really tough job, and you want to be able to share in that experience with others. And it's really hard to tell your friends who have a 9 to 5, or your parents who have no idea what you do, about the experience and have them truly relate to it. And unfortunately, I think for the relationship with the colleagues above you, there's a little bit of, yeah, been there, done that. I got through it. So your peers are really the people that are in the trenches and can perfectly relate to your experience. And hopefully you use that as a way to build one another up and learn in a less high stakes way if you're asking questions of them first, or observing something that they're doing and taking the initiative to learn about it yourself. I mean, I'm still close friends with people in my analyst class. My
Mhm.
husband was an analyst a year ahead of me. Like, those relationships run deep and need to be cultivated. And I think that's the biggest loss in COVID, is that people
Mhm.
come to the office to do their job and then they leave and they've lost some of that community, which is so important when you're working this hard.
I can feel your passion there, and again, who you work with, the culture you build as a team is key to success. So, let's build on that then. As an analyst associate listening today, how do I develop strong peer-to-peer relationships, and how does it help me fast track my career? Any advice there?
Oh, you're not going to like my answer to this. Sometimes you just need to take what you know how to do in life and apply it to your career, and not wait for the leaders to tell you how to develop a relationship with a peer, right? Like,
Yep.
I'm so surprised and perplexed by the level of passion, intensity, focus of these candidates before they get into investment banking. They're so
Mm.
driven. They've been so involved. They're leaders of everything. They find time to do it all well. It's really amazing. And then they get here and they're like, now what? It's like, now what? Do what you've done your whole life that got you to the point where you have a job here, and apply it to your career. Like,
Mm.
wait, are you good at making friends in college when you got there and didn't know anything about it? Probably. Is it even easier to make friends in a situation where you're with one another all day and a lot of the night, day after day after day? Yes. But like, invest in that. Again, don't just come here and do your job and then go home and have your life. In order for you to be successful in investment banking, it needs to be part of your life. And that's not a bad thing. That's an amazing thing. But I feel like people have tried to compartmentalize it and separate the relationship, friendship, community away from work. And that's actually what keeps you in the business.
Yeah. It's a strange shift, isn't it? Because I've been in the
Yeah.
industry 13 and a half years. It's changed so much in COVID. And like you say, getting your work done and having the flexibility to work from home, great things.
Yes.
But at the same time, if you're missing out on those relationships at work, it's so key. So I love that.
Hmm.
And hopefully some of the listeners today take your advice on board as well. I want to talk a little bit about challenges. We've kind of started there, I guess, now in the last question, but I want to talk about it in a bit more detail. So let's look at it per role. So, what do you see as the main challenges facing analysts today? And what advice do you have for them to overcome them?
So I think that the behavior during COVID and in the crazy busy period outside of COVID led to a lot of turnover, not usually at the investment bank's choice, but at the junior banker's choice, because there were so many people calling them and there was an opportunity to make $5,000 more here or work one day less in the office there. And we saw a level of just indifference from the junior bankers that made it very hard for the senior bankers to feel like investing in them was getting the same return. And
Okay.
it's a really hard thing to say, but if I try to break down to the crux of it, senior bankers got to where they are because they took ownership in their work, their deals, their teams, their contribution, and the kind of almost mercenary approach to some of the behavior during the last 5 years, I think has led to a bit of, we don't want to treat you like a resource. We want to treat you like someone that's going to be here, but you're not giving us many indications that you want to be here or aren't looking for your next thing immediately. And
Yeah.
so I think the hardest thing is there is an onus on the senior bankers to rebuild that level of commitment and investment in the junior people after being pretty scarred by things that are not the junior bankers here today, but are unfortunately a byproduct of what the junior bankers before them did. And we get it, right? Like, you're
Yeah.
young and we want you to be successful, but I think every investment bank, including Baird, feels like they do things a bit differently and want to be recognized for being a good place. Well, maybe not, but we want to be recognized for being a good place to work and doing investment banking differently. And so when people are like, well, I have this other opportunity for 5 grand more, or don't need to come in the office, like, that's it hurts.
And looking for those juniors to build that trust with the seniors, what gets it there? Is it just commitment to the work? Is it other things that you're looking for?
It's intellectual curiosity. I mean, it's honestly just like caring. Again, it needs to be sincere, but the best way you can learn is by engaging with members of your team about the why. I mean, I have an amazing team, so this is not specific to them, but I feel like in the industry as a whole, the younger generation is more focused on getting it done and moving to the next thing versus why they're asked to do it and what it means for the bigger picture. And again, that curiosity is what cultivates the passion and the learning and keeps you here and keeps clients wanting to work with you.
I agree with you that curiosity's come up quite a bit in terms of getting seniors to show an interest in mentorship or sponsorship because you're asking questions and you seem passionate and engaged. So that definitely speaks to me and I can relate to it. And what about the associates? Main challenges you see for the associates today and advice to overcome them?
Hmm. I think the associate challenges have not really changed since I was a junior banker. I think the associates differentiate themselves, and I'm mainly referring to the ones out of business school because the direct promotes are leaps and bounds ahead, and right. But the ones that come directly out of business school are bucketed in two buckets. One, I know more than the analysts. I already have my MBA. I've been successful. I've got this. And then the others that say, I can bring something to the table. I may be older than you, but I have no idea what I'm doing. And let's figure this out together. And we see a pretty distinct difference, even in the first 6 months, with how the associates join the platform from business school and either succeed or fail based on their self-awareness of what they know and don't know and the importance of their analyst relationship. And sometimes I feel like in an effort to, well, in like a little bit ego driven way, they don't want to admit when they don't know how to do something because they think that because they're the associate and someone else is the analyst that they should know. And that just creates a lot of inefficiency and frustration that could be avoided if you just said, here's what I know, here's what I don't know. Let's figure out how to make this work.
So your advice really for those coming out the business schools to maybe be a bit more vulnerable, a bit more open with the analyst group and share where maybe you have the gaps and work together on filling those. And is that
Yeah.
the
And
recommendation?
honestly, do the work of the analyst at first.
Mm,
You can't guide someone on a work stream that you don't understand yourself, and you need to put in the extra effort.
super. Okay, thank you. And VPs, we do have a lot of VP listeners. They're closest to moving up into those MD ranks. Depending on who you speak to, they say it's one of the toughest transitions, if not the toughest, VP to MD. So what advice can you share for those vice presidents that are really looking to take that next step?
We have a director bucket in between our VPs and MDs
Okay.
because it is such a hard transition. It's the point at which everything flows. Things flow up, things flow down, things come from every side, clients, third party advisors, buyers, and the VP is at the center of all of that. And I think for the first time, the VP realizes that they can't just process something that someone else has told them to do, but they have to think, get buy in, make a recommendation, make sure people are adhering to the timeline to work backwards towards the due date. And it's a level of project management that they don't have at the associate analyst level, and the stakes are higher. And I think being proactive versus reactive, really organized, and communicating more than you think is necessary are the real keys to success at the VP level.
Okay, so that communicating and organizing. And are there things you should be doing at VP level early to really prepare yourself for the next step? I mean, I guess building organizational skills, I would say, based on what you've said, but other areas that you can start to hone ahead of time.
I mean, my honest feedback is all of us should be more focused on mastering our existing role before we try to do the next role. And I think there is such a rush these days to move through things that doing something once does not make you an expert. And obviously, senior bankers are looking for as much leverage as they can get from the VPs. And that is important to step up if you feel like you mastered the day job and can take on more. But I also see issues when the VP tries to jump without mastering the VP role. And then what the MD or director really needs them to do, which is keep the train running on time, keep the deal and team organized, and it falls away because they're focused on things that they don't need to be yet.
Yeah, fair point. And I guess there's the flip side too. I've heard a lot play up to the next role before you have it, but I like your take as well that actually you need to master it. And we all know that you need to do the reps in investment banking at all levels to really get the mastery. So that's fair. Let's change gears a little bit now. I want to talk a little bit about female leadership and your role on the committee. So obviously, as an inspirational female leader, I know you believe there are unique qualities women can bring to the table. So I hope you could share with our female audience today what they are.
So I'm still trying to figure it all out from what I've heard from others. I think again, and I'm not sure if it's specific to female or specific to the person, but the ability to bring people together is something that can be a bit of a superpower and find commonality and be a connector versus a divider. I think knowing when to play a lead role versus a support role on a team, on a deal, on a decision, like just because I'm a leader of our group doesn't mean that I need to take the lead role or the credit for everything. And I think that the ability to, I mean, I have an ego too, right? But manage the ego a little bit more to say, like, how do I push and prop someone else up who needs that pushing and propping either in front of the client or in front of their team or on a specific issue, perhaps at the expense of getting the credit or whatever myself or solving the problem myself, is appreciated and called out as different. Again, I don't know if it's because I'm a woman and so personality wise that changes or if it's me, but those would be two things. And then I think I'm not always great at listening, but consistently hearing like the listening piece of the conversation from women and maybe even taking it a step further, the nuance of the conversation, picking that up and leaning into that.
Yeah, we had another inspirational leader on series 2. The audience, I'm sure, will hear from her as well. And empathy was something she talked about as well as one of those standout skills that she sees in other successful female leaders. So it's interesting to hear that from you as well. And I think bringing the team together is vital for anyone in those leadership roles. So, and any other advice for aspiring female leaders generally?
There's not a career that I can think of that is more meritocracy focused than investment banking. And while it's great that you're a woman, that doesn't and shouldn't matter in the calibration of your success, either positively or negatively. So don't use it as a victim complex or as a lever to try to get differentiated anything, because the way that you successfully move up in a career in investment banking is by proving yourself personally as the person versus as a gender or any other label, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's how you get respect. You have to earn it.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for sharing, and I'm sure that can be taken on board. And do you think there are things that can be done to support an increase to the number of women, particularly in leadership positions? Because we do know that there's still a big void, really, or a big difference between male and females at the higher end of the leadership roles.
Yes. So twofold, you have to have more female bankers in the
Yeah.
ranks before you can have more female leaders. So we've been working really hard at Baird. We introduced a sophomore female focused investment banking internship and are trying to give sophomore women an actual immersive internship experience versus let's talk about investment banking in a classroom or in a conference room and not put you on the floor and see if you can cut it. And we actually have approached it in a way that is we treat our sophomore interns like we do our junior interns, but it's all women. And we've seen a real improvement in the uptake of both candidates and their confidence and how they project their ability to do the role when they go through the full-time or junior internship recruiting process. And so that's been super exciting. I feel like you have to start at the ground level. It's going to take time, but it's okay. I think one of the things that Baird did for me, I can't speak to female leaders in general, but twofold. One, they've asked me to play different roles over time that I didn't necessarily see as a linear path to anything. And I was focused on doing my deals and focused on building my sector credibility and my relationships and whatnot. And there have been times over the past 10 years that I can now look back and say, okay, they asked me to lead this committee, or they asked me to speak at this event, or they asked me to move into this different role. And I didn't see it at the time, but one of our co-heads of global investment banking, Brian McDonough, said leaders' job is to look around corners on your behalf and put utility players in a place that they can have the biggest impact. So please just like trust us. And looking back, like there was a method to the madness and a plan for it all. And they were giving me abilities to show like micro leadership responsibilities and lower stakes settings across a lot of different things in the department, which built my relationship and network across the investment bank further. It built my confidence. It built my problem solving. And that's really been wonderful. And the other thing I would say, which has been helpful, and again, I think others on our leadership team have the same. So it's not necessarily a female thing, but when I was asked to take over the global consumer co-head role, they got me a coach. And I had never worked with any type of leadership coach or executive coach, but it's been a really helpful way to have someone who has navigated many people's careers to just speak with once a month and reflect on my why and what I've accomplished and like what I'm focused on next. And that's something that has helped me grow my confidence and ability to communicate to my team the reasons behind the decisions. And that's something that I think as a female leader, the knee jerk is to be less boastful, less of a command control, less aggressive, and talking through that and feeling convicted in the decisions that I'm making and that they're with the best intent has helped me be able to lean into that leadership more.
That's great. Obviously, you've had some great support there, I think, in terms of the opportunities provided
Yeah,
and to get coaching as well is
absolutely.
amazing. So Baird's obviously doing a lot of good things in that area. For someone who is not at the highest level yet and maybe won't
Yeah.
get that opportunity to have that outside coach, what advice to capture mentors, to capture internal coaches? Like, what do you have there? Because I think that's so important to growth and development.
Yeah. So we have spent a lot of time on creating an infrastructure of mentorship and development. It's not perfect. People still need to find natural connectivity and do the work on their own. But we have in place development managers that work with a subset of the analyst class or the associate class or the VP class and meet monthly to talk about things. And those people are usually 2 levels or more above them. So they're getting MD or director time every month. And then we have a mentor program that is 1 level above them. So it's more kind of on the ground, like I
Hmm.
didn't know how to do with it, this or deal with this. What should I think about? And then we have a women's mentorship program, again, which is creating a different level of dialogue and connectivity. And not all of those are going to be perfect. They're not all going to be the best kind of natural relationship pairing, but hopefully it's a way to facilitate dialogue about small things and big things with enough different people that you get into the rhythm of talking about your career and what's going on and seeking advice and help, and you're hearing from different types of people with different perspective and levels of experience and whatnot, that hopefully creates more of a well-rounded network of support.
That's great. It's great that you provide those opportunities. It's rare that I actually speak into leaders that have so many programs in place. So you're obviously working hard on that. And if every mentorship program in place is perfect or not, hopefully it helps build the skills to then go and find
Yeah.
another mentor or understand what it takes in those types of relationships. So
Yeah.
hopefully the team will grab onto that. I think you've kind of talked a little bit about some of the initiatives that are probably coming down from the committee, but
Yes.
yeah, as a member of Baird's management committee, how are you navigating the current challenges that are being seen in the industry?
With grace and perspective that, yeah, exactly. I mean, the wonderful thing about Baird, which we are all very fortunate for, is that we're privately held and employee owned. And so we don't need to make short term personnel decisions that impact our long term success. So we've actually navigated it in a really forward leaning way and said, okay, the last time that there was significant market disruption in '08 and '09, we hired a bunch of incredible talent. We doubled down on our value proposition. We were super organized. We kept the team together. And that propelled us through an incredible run, right? Where we took market share, built our team the right way, added new offices and sector efforts, moved up market while still being super relevant to the best assets that were smaller. it really was game changing in terms of our positioning from a competitive landscape standpoint. So we've been doing the same thing. We've been hiring all year, not just randomly, like opportunistically looking to fill in gaps, upgrade talent, prepare for the market return. And we've also, I think, been able to stay internally collaborative and focus our energy on being externally competitive versus in a market like this at other shops. It's very hard to not feel like you're all of a sudden competing for your job against your colleague who you're supposed to be partnering with to get to the best outcome. And so we've really tried to maintain the culture of teamwork, and our approach is what sets us apart. Don't lose sight of that. We are continuing to treat this as a meritocracy, but we are continuing to invest for the long term, and we're not going to make any stupid short term decisions because the market has been slower at the expense of our long term opportunity. And so I think it's given people confidence that we believe in the long term, we believe in them, and if they're performing well, that they're going to be taken care of. And it's led to more energy again being used to attack our competitors, win more business, just drive versus the alternative.
Excellent. I love the optimism and the fact that you're looking to grow and, as you say, double down. And that's brought success in the past, and why would it not? And I'm confident, based on the conversations I'm having, that the markets will be a lot better. They can't be much worse than last year.
No,
So
the deal toys are going to just start flowing, flowing
music to
like
my
lava.
ears. We'll get you a few more for your shelf there, that's for sure.
Right.
But that's excellent. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. And just a note on AI, your take on AI and how it can be used or how it should be used in the coming years.
So right now, Baird's focus is on capturing all of the data, which we've been doing for years. We've been tracking, I think, since 2012, buyer behavior on every single one of our processes and how people move through a process, increase, decrease, bid, don't, etc. But doubling down on our team and the emphasis on capturing everything that's happening on our deals, because our view is you can't have AI with imperfect information or else it doesn't give advice that makes any sense. And so I don't think it ever replaces, I mean, this is too important of a role from a transaction standpoint. In many founders or management team cases, it's life changing, right? And like, you don't want to rely on a scrape from any type of system to be delivering a recommendation, but there's got to be a use for it. So right now we're more focused on making sure that our data and history is captured really cleanly and comprehensively, and then figuring out what that means in terms of what else it tells us.
Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I think it's an interesting concept, isn't it? And not everyone's quite sure how it's going to impact or be implemented, but
Yeah.
obviously there's efficiency gains there. So it's nice to understand your uses there in the data. I'll ask you a few questions on culture, and then I'm going to
Okay.
move towards wrap because I know you've got a lot on, as always.
Okay.
In terms of investment banking, we've talked about the demands of it, the work that goes into it. How do you manage culture effectively as a leader whilst considering the demands of the business?
I think having a good culture is not inconsistent with driving the business. Our view is if you have a good culture, you invest in the team and their development, if you create an environment that people want to come to work every day, if the teams invest in their people and tell them the why, that creates better teamwork, better coordination, better outcomes for the clients. So we don't think it's just a nice thing to have a nice culture. We think it's a business imperative and an advantage, and why we win and why we have the same clients over and over and over again, because they can feel that we enjoy working together and enjoy what we do and are all rowing together to get the best outcome. So I don't think it needs to be a culture at expense of business. I think it's good business to have a good culture.
Fair. And again, I guess if everyone's rowing in the same direction and the culture's good, then the demands of the day to day feel less. So I can
Yeah.
definitely relate to that. And which part of IBD culture would you most like to see change?
I'd like to see us get back to a realistic timeline of a process and not move quickly at all phases for the sake of it. I think it's become a little bit of a runaway train, and it doesn't, there are situations where people need to be here all night or need to work 7 days a week because the deal situation demands it. But that's not every deal. It's not every deliverable. It's not every situation. And so keeping that in check and making sure that we don't have to have the sense of urgency that we had in 2021 in every situation. We don't have to push everyone so hard and then have the issue of a bit of the boy who cried wolf. I'd rather be more intentional about the give and take of the role so that people want to do it long.
Thanks for sharing. Very honest feedback there. And hopefully that's well received by everyone listening today. So looking back on your career, we've kind of done a lot of that, I guess, today, and you're in reflection mode. If you could go back to you in your first week in investment banking, what's the one piece of advice you'd give yourself, knowing what you know now?
Uh, I don't know. I don't think I would change it, but I'm really happy at how rewarding it's been at every level. I really feel like so many young bankers these days use it as a stepping stone. And I mean, my husband is a partner in a private equity firm, so I know that world too, right? But this, if you stay in it, is so fun. It's so great to be at the center of really really smart, successful people making really tough decisions that impact a lot of people's lives. And it gets more fun as you get more senior. It doesn't become less intense, the intensity changes in it, but it's something that, I find real joy in. And I could retire today if I wanted to, based on the financial success of the job. But I do it because I really am fulfilled by it.
Amazing. So don't change anything, but stick with it. For those listening,
Yeah, stick
it can
with
be a
it.
rewarding
Stick
career.
with it. It's worth it.
I feel your passion for that. So thanks for sharing. I'm a big believer that leaders are readers, and maybe not just books these days. There's a lot of other materials, such as podcasts, out there. But are there any materials that you recommend to those listening today that have had a really good impact on you and your growth?
So the book Radical Candor was really helpful to me in the early days of taking my role and figuring out how to deliver tough messages. It was both through examples that gave me more confidence in how to do it, and then just showing the impact of giving the good radical feedback as the reason for it. It was helpful. One of my former clients, James Reed, just wrote a book called The Red Helicopter, which actually talks about his experience working as a CEO of a company that we sold for him.
Wow.
And his style was this amazing combination of analytics and kindness. And the story talks about that. But I think that's a really important lesson, that you can be both. You can have high standards and be kind. And back to the culture makes good business sense. You know, it's a good one.
That's a definitely good message I can get behind. So we will pop those in the show notes. So those listening, if they want to grab it, they can. And I suggest they do. Before we really do wrap, anything I haven't asked you that you feel the audience should know at this point?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk today, and think that what you guys are doing is really, it's really great. Obviously, this wasn't available when I was coming up, and so it was like a microcosm of investment banking. But there's a lot out there that all of us can learn from. So hopefully, people got something out of it. But I enjoyed the process and the self reflection of it. It makes me excited again to be here, and reminds me of why I do it, which is appreciated.
Awesome. Well, I love the energy. Well, to you, thank you so much for being with us today. I know you are very busy. You didn't disappoint. Ton of great insight from your experience, your
Thank
skills, and your
you.
career that I'm very confident the listeners will take a lot of value from. So, looking forward to the final listen. And other than
Okay.
that, best of luck for those transactions.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Cheers, Maria. Take care.
Bye.
This episode was brought to you by Outram, the global leaders in the financial deal gift, awards, and recognition space. So if you need any assistance in these areas, don't be afraid to hit me or the team up. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, best of luck on your growth journey.